Chapter 65, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy. Pete Seeger. Originally released on the album Waist Deep in the Big Muddy and Other Love Songs, Columbia, 1967. Written by Pete Seeger. This song is a remembrance of things past. You're looking back to olden times, to things that have happened before now. You're in a militia, a volunteer army, a newcomer, a raw recruit, practicing tactics and playing war games in the swamplands. You're learning how to take fire, trigger mines and throw bombs. In the dark of night, the skipper tells you to cut across a tributary stream, the Big Muddy, and you're knee-deep in it. The platoon leader says to push on, but a non-commissioned officer questions that. He says to the chief, "Are you confident that this is the best way to get back to the terminal? The way things are stacking up, it doesn't look too good." The chief will have none of it. Says, "I've crossed this river a mile up before, and these questions are unwarranted. It might get a little spongy, but just keep slogging, keep advancing. We'll be on terra firma in no time." Before you know it, you're waist deep in the muck, and you're starting to get concerned. Still though, the head honcho says continue on, keep moving, no ifs or buts. The sergeant says, "Sir, we're too loaded down with baggage and contraptions. We'll be dragged under." The commander says, "Don't be silly, your arguments are baseless. Come on man, show some backbone and willpower. Do like me. Come on, let's get this show on the road." But now you're neck deep in the slush, and still the wacko captain says to keep going. Pretty soon there's a murky shadow over your head, and you hear a splashing and gurgling. The top dog's helmet comes floating by. The sergeant says, "Turn around men and go back. I'm the big gun now. Do as I say." You plunge into the slimy deep, descend down to the bottom, and you see your dead leader's body stuck in the muddy quagmire. He didn't know that the water was deeper here than the place he was before, didn't realise he was walking towards the drop-off, hadn't known that a second stream was lumped together with this one, and that the cross-current would swirl around and pull him down. You narrowly escape from the Big Muddy, but the old war horse is long gone. It was by accident that you got out of there. You had a lucky break. The nutty captain wasn't so lucky, and the unfortunate incident nauseated you, but you're not going to come down on anybody or implicate anybody. You just want to wash your hands and be free of it. When you see the standard reports in the news of this tragic event, that old feeling can't help but come back. That we are always deep in a gigantic, colossal mess, and some big idiot is telling us to push on. It would take a lifetime to relive all your memories. You want to do it all in a day. Quite often there is the whiff of the killjoy in the exposure of subterfuge. Whether it be the proud know-it-all refocusing misdirected attention on a gimmicked coin at a magic show, or a local TV reporter exposing some kind of modern medical quackery. There's no mistaking the smug smile as they remind their audience that they were one up on them. However, the illumination of facts surrounding the oft-repeated belief that lemmings follow each other off cliffs in mass ritualistic suicide is not meant to disillusion nor disappoint. On the contrary, this story of rodentia harikari is chock full of entertaining lies and chicanery. It is enjoyable in the same way a flask of whiskey can be on a cold winter night. Fine to savour alone, better when shared. The image of lemmings rushing en masse to their shared doom has become such a common and vivid image that it's hard to believe that it has only solidified as animal legend since the late 1950s, as a falsified part of an Academy Award-winning documentary from the Walt Disney Company. Between 1955 and 1958, James R. Simon was one of 9 photographers Disney sent to produce the documentary White Wilderness, a breathtaking, full-colour close-up look at animal life in the savage and cruel environment of the North American Arctic. After assignments were divvied up, Simon was tasked with documenting the behaviour of the lemming, a small rounded rodent, cousin to the common rat and gerbil, with a flat claw on each front paw to help dig in the snowy areas they call home. Sometimes the difference between religion and science can be measured in the distance between the unanswered and the unanswerable question. People live in fear. For instance, at the end of the day when the sun disappeared, people were afraid it might never come back. Religion calmed them with a solution to the unanswerable question. The Greek god Helios dragged the sun across the sky every morning in a golden chariot. It was his job. He would do it every day, and that calmed the fear of living in darkness. Time passed and science made discoveries, and unanswerable questions began to get answered. The Earth spun on its axis and revolved around the sun. Helios retired. Migration habits were really mysterious because they happened across such large areas and over time as well. No one knew where birds went in the winter. People used to believe they slept like birds in underground caves. Then we learned different. Lemmings migrate to more spacious areas when their population density becomes overwhelming. Because they are travelling through terrain unknown to them, there's a certain number of casualties, and it's not unusual to find their small bodies at the foot of cliffs or drowned in unfamiliar lakes and rivers in their quest for new open space. But it's not mass suicide, though locals and hunters did tell tales. Enter James Simon and the Disney film crew. The truth was not very photogenic, and Simon was already well versed in the difficulties nature documentarians faced in getting their subjects to perform on cue. Simon used a number of film tricks to build a dramatic sequence. He bought a dozen lemmings and shot them from a number of angles to multiply their numbers. He placed them on a crowded turntable to give the illusion of migratory freneticism, and then, finally, chased them off a cliff himself into the Bow River below, making it look like a surge of mob mentality had driven them mad and ultimately to their watery grave. The image of these small creatures blindly following each other to their doom also became a common metaphor for mindless groups, like the obedient platoon in the Pete Seeger song who followed their stubborn commanding officer into the Mississippi River near a Louisiana training camp until he was swallowed up by quicksand. Luckily, a quick-thinking sergeant turned them around and marched them back to base. That song, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, is totally true, perhaps. Pete Seeger, along with the rest of the Weavers, had been banned from television in the early 50s. It was the McCarthy era, and Pete's left-leaning politics and refusal to testify or sign papers for the House Un-American Activities Committee had kept him off television well into the following decade. But it didn't stop him from singing and playing and spreading messages both political and cultural in more intimate live settings. Come 1967, Tom and Dick's mothers broke the 17-year ban by inviting Pete onto their CBS program. Pete performed a number of songs, among them one he had recently written, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy. When William Paley heard the song at rehearsal and realised the lyrics were Pete's allegory to the quagmire escalating in Vietnam, Paley cut the song from the show. The CBS boss didn't want a repeat of a recent experience, where he had been woken at 3 a.m. by an angry LBJ after a sketch lampooning him ran on the same programme. Needless to say, the brothers were furious. But a year later, momentum shifted. Even Walter Cronkite broke his usual stance of neutrality and spoke against the war. Pete Seeger returned to CBS and sang Big Muddy for the Smothers Brothers audience. It made the news when he didn't sing it, and it made the news when he did. That's because everybody was tuned into the same TV shows. People against the war, people in favour of it. We all had a shared baseline cultural vocabulary. People who wanted to see the Beatles on a variety show had to watch flamenco dancers, baggy pants comics, ventriloquists, and maybe a scene from Shakespeare. Today, the medium contains multitudes, and man needs only pick one thing he likes and feast exclusively on a stream dedicated to it. There's 24 hours of blues, surf music, left-wing whining, right-wing badgering, any stripe of belief imaginable. There are stories as interesting as lemming suicides and totally true. Like the fact that whale songs have inexplicably lowered in pitch 30% since the 60s. But these stories are buried on animal documentary channels, where they will probably never capture the general public's imagination. Turns out the best way to shut people up isn't to take away their forum, it's to give them all their own separate pulpits. Ultimately, most folks will listen to what they already know and read what they already agree with. They will devour pale retreads of the familiar and perhaps never get to discover they might have a taste for Shakespeare or flamenco dancing. It's the equivalent of letting an 8-year-old pick their own diet. Inevitably, they'll choose chocolate for every meal and end up undernourished with rotted teeth and weighing 500 pounds. Somewhere between Pete's Big Fool and Lemmings being chased off a cliff.